Welcome to Flight Level Zero. It all starts here. I'm Joe Peebles, your host. Welcome to the show. If you are a veteran and you need help or support, or you just need to talk to somebody, please call the Veterans Crisis Line. Dial 988, press 1. Everything's confidential. They just want to get you help. What you are going through is a unique situation that only service members and their families understand, so please reach out to the people who get it. Flight Level Zero is brought to you by our sponsors, JP Aerotechnics. JP Aero is an AOG mobile maintenance provider for Part 135 and Part 91 business jet operators. We provide quick and reliable service to the southeastern USA. If you have a downed aircraft, MELs, or just need someone to do service checks regularly, we can support you. Call 833-807-3131 or just email us at aog@jpaerotechnics.com. All right, what do we talk about here at Flight Level Zero? What is Flight Level Zero? Flight Level Zero is a podcast that I created. It is a self-development podcast, and we have a sprinkle of aviation in there since that's the industry I'm in. It's kind of my life, so that's what we talk about here. I talk to aviation professionals about their journey. We talk about self-development and how to become a dominating factor in life and industry. We also talk about the good, the bad, the ugly parts of life, and the tools that can help you overcome those hard times because they will inevitably come. We have 3 types of shows. We have full-length episodes where I bring on a guest and talk about their story. That's what today's show is. We also have a solo. That's where it's just me for 10 or 15 minutes talking about a few things that I've learned in the industry over the years or whatever might be on my mind for that day. So thank you very much for listening. And then we have current events where we come on and we talk about what's trending in the BizAv industry. If you like the show, if it makes you think, if it makes you smile, if you think we did a good job, please like and share it. Leave a review on whatever platform you listen to. This helps us grow the brand and bring our show to people who need it. So thank you very much for your participation and thanks for your help. Quick update for Hire Vets. We are collecting data on veterans and what they need in order to be successful in this transition to their civilian life. Please, if you're interested in helping out, go to hirevets.org and answer our questionnaire. We have 3 simple questions there that will help us create a better product to serve our veteran community. The best part is you don't have to be a veteran to answer the questions. If you think you know what veterans need, please get on there. We're trying to collect data so we can get out there and take care of people. Again, that's hirevets.org. The links will be in the show notes below. All right, a couple updates for Flight Level Zero real quick. We are starting a YouTube channel. If you're watching this will be on YouTube. Thank you very much for watching, and we're excited about this. We've been purely audio for about 21 episodes. We're moving to YouTube. Secondly, we're starting a swag shop. So if you want to support the show, if you like what you're listening to, we're going to have hoodies and hats and shirts and all kinds of little doohickeys for you. You can get mugs and whatever you want. Everything's made to order. And any part of the proceeds, we're taking a part of those proceeds and we're putting that into hirevets.org. So if you buy our clothing, you're also helping the show and you're helping veterans transition into civilian life. So if you want to support, please reach out and take a look at our swag. If you like it, pick some up. So now that we're done talking business, let's get down to business. Today, I'm excited to introduce someone who's not only a close friend, but also a powerhouse in aviation. With 20 years of experience in the aviation industry, plus Adam has become a true expert and advocate for private jet operators worldwide. He brings a unique and innovative approach to mission planning, feasibility, and consultation, supporting operators of all kinds with his extensive expertise. Adam's resume speaks for itself. He's an FAA licensed dispatcher, an authority in both international and domestic regulatory compliance, as well as sustainability in aviation, an increasingly critical focus of the industry. His knowledge extends across the intricate requirements of CBP, TSA, DOT, and FAA regulations, ensuring operators are always prepared, whether they're navigating complex international missions or addressing charter needs worldwide. Beyond his operation know-how, Adam has also been recognized as top 40 under 40 in business aviation by the NBAA. He's serving currently on the NBAA Security Council, is an advisory member of the STX-BAA, and the former chair of the NBAA Scheduling and Dispatching Committee. Adam's deep industry involvement is the testament to his commitment, instrumental voice on regulatory security and sustainability issues, shaping how operators meet challenges. I'm thrilled to have you on the show today and share his insights and experiences with us. Get ready for a conversation packed with expertise, innovation, and the passion he brings to his work every day. Adam, welcome. What's up, man?
Hey, man. Good morning, Joe. That is a mouthful. Are you sure I did all those things?
I think so.
Very cool.
Yeah, man. Super glad to have you on the show, man. Excited to have you here. So let's go ahead and hop into it, man. You've been in the business for 20 years plus. Can you walk us through your journey? What initially attracted you to the aviation industry, and how has that path evolved over the years?
Yeah, so my journey in business aviation or aviation in general, my journey goes back to childhood. I'm from an aviation family. My grandfather was an aviator and worked in the shop ran the shop back in Springfield, Illinois, many, many years ago. Brought that passion for aviation to his kids. My uncle's a corporate pilot and has been a corporate pilot for 30 plus years. But my dad was a private pilot. And so I can still remember, going out and flying around in the 172s and things like that, from a very early age. We were an aviation family. We did the Houston Air Show all the time. Almost every year we were out there. The really good years were when he had, like the corporate passes and stuff to the VIP tent at the air show. I can remember all that stuff really clearly. So aviation was always in our family and something that we were always interested in and talking about. When I was going to school in my early 20s, going to school and working full time, I was working as a concrete dispatcher. I was working for Cemex as a concrete dispatcher. And concrete dispatch is really good when it's really good and really bad when it's really bad. If it's a rainy summer or rainy season, you have a lot of early days. And I was looking for something. It was funny. I was looking for something more consistent, right? I was looking for something with more consistent hours. And my mom knew somebody in human resources at Universal Weather and Aviation. And they were talking like over lunch at Olive Garden or something. And she said, "Oh, if Adam's looking for something different, why doesn't he come in and try over here?" And, that was in January of 2004 at Universal Weather and Aviation. And I've been at Universal Weather ever since. I walked in and kind of told them the same thing. I said, I'm looking for something consistent and looking for somewhere where I can make a mark and somewhere that I can commit to. And they said, sure, come on in. And so I've been at Universal now for 20 odd years. And that has afforded me a lot of different opportunities, both within the organization and then learning about this bigger industry, this bigger, broader industry that I became a part of, knowing nothing about it other than that it existed when I made that move, right? I didn't really know what corporate jets or business aviation was really about at all.
Well, Adam, so going back to that time, like now you're like the guy, regulatory procedure, all the stuff you're having. So if you don't know Adam, he's on a lot of social, the BizAv guy, at the BizAv guy on pretty much every platform. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah, so you can find him, and you're doing stuff with customs. I love the coffee things that you guys are doing. What is that called?
Coffee with Customs.
Coffee with Customs.
And that comes out of the service provider working group. So that was born of another working group, of another collaboration in industry. That's really that's been the second part of my career. I feel like that first, I don't know, maybe the first 10 years or something like that, I didn't really know what was available to me outside of my own industry. I didn't know what was available to me outside of my own job. And I guess everybody has that. If you're at a place long enough, you have that moment where things go from job to something more than that, right? Something more than a 9 to 5, something more of just punching the clock. And so Universal has given me all those different opportunities to grow internally. And then as I got confident with that internally, then it gave me the confidence to reach out and try to find things outside of my organization that also interested me.
Yeah. So let's talk about that move when you came into BizAv working at Universal. You didn't know anything about, first of all, the industry, and then also you didn't know, you obviously didn't know what you know now as far as regulations and so let's talk through that. How did you gain all this knowledge? Like what did you do to kind of get here? And I think sometimes when you come into a new field, you're like you deal with not knowing what to do, how to do it.
So you're learning aviation, and this has happened several different times throughout my career. It's funny because this last week and this week I went and dropped in at on two different classes at Universal. There's so much going on at Universal all the time, so there's a lot of opportunity to engage with people doing different types of jobs in business aviation. But there's always a couple of different classes that I drop in on, and that's our new hire class. So people who are just coming into Universal Universal. This group that I talked to the other day had been there for 34 days. This was their 34th day on the job, right? And none of them had any aviation experience, any true aviation experience. And that's how I came into my job too. I started at Universal doing flight following. So before everybody was tracking everything through FlightAware and others online and other online flight tracking tools, we did it. We did it analog. We picked up the phone and called the FBO where the airplane was going and said, "What time did that airplane get there?" And they gave us the time. So we started manually tracking aircraft.
Yeah.
That's what I started in, is calling and saying, November 123, what time did they arrive? What time did they depart? Loading that information, and then that flight following being sent downline to probably fax machines at most, home base hangars and different stuff like that.
Interesting.
The other job that we were doing in flight following was updating U.S. Customs, because flight following and U.S. Customs were so tied intricately that you had to update and be within a few minutes to meet Customs. Not every other service is like that, or certainly has the same impetus. So along with doing flight following, we started calling Customs offices. And along that route, we had a couple of people in our team. One was Laura Everington, and she, along with doing these other things that we were doing, also did a couple other things I thought was pretty cool. She was running a couple of programs, and I didn't quite understand what it was at the time, but it was the early Southern Border Overflight program and Visa Waiver program. And Laura specifically as an individual, but Universal as the organization, had such a key role in bringing those programs to the non-scheduled environment, right? These are all different types of programs that were not really built with GA in mind. Present day program that we've done that same trick was done with is RSP, a program that wasn't really designed for BizAv, but has become a really critical tool for us because realizing that we could leverage it. But Laura was very focused on this customs piece and very passionate and adamant about how important it was, and that it wasn't just transactional, and that there was a bigger game at play here, and it wasn't just a part of flight following. It wasn't just a destination for the last leg of your trip, right? That there was a lot more that went into it, and that there was a real way to do it right. And that spoke to me. And, a few years into my career, she helped start the first global regulatory services team in trip support. So where we said, okay, U.S. Customs-based programs and other regulatory-like programs really deserve their own team, their own resources, their own focus, because they're changing, they're dynamic, the risk and reward is high, right? The risk for penalties and different things, the reward for a smooth clearance, and she was able to lay out that vision. And I promise, Joe, it's a vision that I have just continued to build on and build on and build on over the next 15 years. Laura was able to describe it to me so clearly and say how this was going to be different than what we were doing, to the point of saying, don't go learn the core model, right? Somebody like me at Universal who shows talent and aptitude for the logistics business rapidly becomes a mission advisor, right? That's how that works at Universal or other trip support companies, because that's where legacy you impacted the client the most, right? But I really liked this specialization that she was talking about, and I could see the idea of this overall general trip and general services, but I really was drawn to what she talked about. And when there was opportunities to choose, I say choose, I was a newbie with no authority. I had no authority, but I made it clear that I wanted, if she was going to continue down this regulatory path and try to establish that I wanted to be involved in that, and not and it's about that. It's finding that mentor. It's finding that message. Like, it's like, she said, I'm going to do, like, here, we're doing something different, and I've got a plan to do something different. And I could go learn how go learn the old stuff, or I could get on the leading edge with this person. And I saddled up next, hip to hip with her, and we've been like that. We've been like that ever since. And that led to some other opportunities. But that's where I segued into, let's specialize a little bit and go learn this thing and start getting some real knowledge that was not so much based in my company, my organization, our services. I need to go learn something. Like, this is something I can make my own in some ways.
So what does that innovative approach to mission planning kind of look like? Are you able to give us like a small peek into how that approach works?
What has always resonated with me, what I've always enjoyed, is working directly with operators, and so it's really about the fundamentals of what's needed to support business aviation. Not 15 years ago and today. It's only more complicated today than it was 15 years ago. But I don't think that the paradigm has really changed all that much. That you have two pieces working. You have got the aircraft operator, all their equipment, their people, their capabilities, their permits, their LOAs, their what can they do, and the regulatory piece is a growing piece of that on what's required for them to be prepared. And then there's trips, there's locations, there's challenges with every location that you're going. There's unique high traffic events. There's war, there's all sorts of there's weather, there's all sorts of other things, other services that you're trying to, and then there's those unique custom services that are only for this trip or that trip or the next, where I'm really just been focusing more on aircraft operators in general. And that and Laura had pushed me to the operators, pushed me to the people, introduced me to the people who are overcoming these challenges, right, or facing these challenges, and that's where I really started to resonate or see myself in business aviation, right, is once I started to get out there and actually working with operators and getting out of the transactions somewhat and saying, okay, how can we do this better, and started to riff off that initial idea with Laura. What if we did this? What if we did that? What if we got ahead of these? What if we
So it's trial and error, really. It's like you figure it out. You get, they got to this place and there's a war going on. How do we figure out how to get around that so that we can still complete this mission?
It's about preparedness, right? A war is going on, so you should be enrolled with the State Department with the STEP enrollment program, right? There's any number of conflicts out there around the world right now, and so you want to be leveraging every tool that you have at your, for you and your travelers at your capability.
In my business, we deal with emergency situations, but there are a lot of predictable things within that, right? So every time that there is an AOG that happens, I know that there are going to be tools needed, or there are going to be communications with FBOs, or maybe a hangar or something like that. So having a proactive approach with those for me is making sure I have already a good relationship with the FBO, building that relationship with them, making sure that they understand that they can trust us, that they have all of our insurance paperwork, that they know that we are a reliable resource for maintenance and providing a safe environment for their workers. We've already done the work and the homework, making sure that all the line guys know who we are already. Not only that, we've already planned every place around that rents out lifts or jacks or tooling that we need. We've already got a relationship established with that group, right? So that it makes the unpredictable easier, because we already have systems in place and we understand that the things that can be taken control of are already controlled. And so we're really just going and fixing the airplane. The situation is different, but we already have like a set system of ways to kind of handle it. And I think that's where you guys come into play for the operator. You in particular, you are the subject matter expert when it comes to making sure that all the unknowns are known beforehand so that the mission can happen effectively, efficiently for the customer.
Yeah. So here's what does that expertise get you, right? Like in so many cases these days, having, let's say you want to be sign up for Adam's Emergency Regulatory Consultative Service, and whenever you have something that pops up on a trip that you weren't ready, you pick up the phone and call me, and I'm the best in the business, and I'm gonna jump all over it. And guess what? It's probably too freaking late. So at that point, and so what I'm trying to say is my phone number, and my phone number's been on every email I've sent for the past 15 years, right? If that was the easy button to make trips a success, then my phone would be ringing off the hook nonstop. But that's the point. It's not, because these things are systems, right? This is a transport industry. There's all these different things we want to make it, and all the different discussions we're having about sustainability, inequality, and these different discussions, it's still a transportation sector. Like, I like to deal, there's some things of what we would like it to be. There's some other outcomes like sustainability that we want it to be good stewards of. But at the end of the day, we have to treat it like what it is, which is a segment of the transportation industry as operates today under a variety of dynamic changing rules and regulations. And you've got to be, planning. What everybody has legacy planned for is the places they've been told they're going to go. So you sit down with the board of directors and they say, here's our trips for the year, right? Then you prepare for the places you've been told. You prepare for the places you've been before, right? You're like, oh, I've been there. I know that place. I got that worked out. Okay, and then we've scoped out all the new places they told us about. And where are you always going to get burned? In that third box, the ones that you haven't been to before and that nobody told you about, and they didn't tell you, not because they're mean and they're trying to see how good you are. It's just the nature of the business, and so and there's so many reasons you can end up in box 3 that you didn't expect to be there. There's so many reasons you can end up in a location that you did not plan to be in. And everything that you didn't take care of before you got there is friction at that point. It's, if you didn't register to be able to pay your passenger tax in Denmark, and now you're unexpectedly in Denmark, I'm not saying that passenger tax is the thing that's going to get you, is going to kill the trip. But it's friction, Joe. It's something that you're talking about that ain't flight plans, that ain't fuel, that ain't safety, that ain't passenger transportation, that ain't catering, that ain't all the things that your principal in the back is going to consider success or not success for this trip. And it's all about, not even about making things necessarily even accessible or not accessible. There's access there's access, and then there's flexibility. And flexibility can be flexible in being able to broadly plan. It can also be flexible in the way to broadly react in a much more effective way. So that's really where this has been going. And it's funny thinking about those early years at Universal, Joe. I think everybody gets into a job, and it takes you some time to even figure out that you can change it. At least it was for me, right? You got to learn it first before you can change it, right? And then, but there's just this whole self-realization that, I've got ideas, I've got something that I want to chase, something that I want to grow, and regulatory taught me that in a very, it's very clean. New regulation, new product, new service, right? It's here's the new requirement for business aviation. Kind of chase it down and fix it, or chase it down and come up with a product and service. But they just keep growing, right? And so if you keep trying to chase it from point to point to point, you're gonna miss some stuff. But it's just funny that it takes a while to figure out that you can, even if you're in a job, not one where you're the jefe, but if you're just in a job, it takes a while to get comfortable to say, hey, I think things would be better if we did X.
Well, I think that sometimes you come into a place as the new guy and stuff makes sense to you if you did it like this. But there's somebody who's been there, and you have systems in place and you have stuff that already works a certain way. But there's a reason behind it, and it should be more than it's just how we always do it. There's probably a reason that we do certain things a certain way, because somebody went through all the other objections and all the other problems and figured out this is the easiest way to do it. But until you know that process, that's where what I really like what you said is you have to know how you do already so that you can figure out ways to do it better. You can't just come in and look at something like, oh, it's going to be better like this, because you don't know. You haven't done it. But if you know the process, you understand how the things work. And so I think when you get into a new position in a new industry or a new spot, a new job, you've got to learn your job. You've got to really dig in and understand the ins and outs of your role, how what you do affects dispatch, or how what you do affects the mechanics, or how what you do affects the pilots and the crew, how it affects the company as a whole, so that if you do want to make changes to it, you have a good reason and a good understanding of how you do it right now and why you do it, and why the effective change will make you more efficient. But yeah, man. So quick question with how everything's evolving, what is like one or two must know regulations for all operators that often get overlooked?
The three buckets are right now are data, so e-manifest data. So in the U.S. we call it APIS. In the U.K. they call it GAR, and in the Caribbean they call it CARICOM. So the expansion, rapid expansion of e-manifest requirements. As we grow in the next 5-10 years, you're not going to be doing an international flight. EU LISA is another big one that's a similar style of requirement. So we're seeing all these different flavors of e-manifest transmission, and that's just going to grow and grow and grow. So collecting data on who's coming to your country and who is leaving your country is not going out of style anytime soon. Countries are getting more and more strict on how they control borders, and so these tools are going to expand. So keeping an eye on international APIS style requirements. The tax environment, we've seen UK APD just announced they're going to double their taxes in 2026, so that now a passenger departing the UK is going to be over £1,000 per passenger in just tax on departures from the UK. So and there's new passenger taxes coming online all the time. So that's something that people need to be aware of. And then sustainability. Sustainability is continuing to evolve. Getting everybody involved in EU ETS and UK ETS is really as complicated and inane as those programs were. I think is going to end up being kind of like 101, emissions 101 for where this is going to go. So with things like non CO2 emissions, so how you track the impact of things like contrails, as well as SAF, and how the different regulations coming in about how much SAF has to be incorporated for operators and fuelers, as well as how you're going to report all of that SAF usage and incorporate that into your emissions reporting. So those are the three biggest ones: the data for flight and passenger, the taxes. We are a huge target for new taxation right now. Everybody thinks that that everybody who's involved in the jet business is making $1 billion. I think. I don't think that there's this huge gap in reality and what the public sees when they see a corporate jet. One of the hardest ways to make a buck in the world is flying commercial aircraft like that.
Oh my goodness!
And those people paying the highest tax burden, are the commercial operators, and dealing with the most regulatory burden is the commercial operators, and they're the ones. The people in the back may have $1 billion, but the aircraft operator does not have $1 billion to pass out freely.
One of the biggest jokes that I've heard over the past 2 decades in aviation is like, how do you become a millionaire? You start with $1 billion and open an aviation business.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, my dad always sold some similar version. How do you become a millionaire?
Yeah.
Or how do you make $1 million? Start with 2 and stop when you've lost the first million. Something like that. So I feel bad. It's just it's another place where we business aviation are not represented enough and telling the right story with the public, and it's and we're really getting beat up in with the public right now, and that results in things like harsher sustainability regulations, less access, higher noise restriction. And remember, sustainability is not just CO2. Noise is a big part of challenges around access and hours for BizAv. And we're continuing to lose ground. This past summer was we lost some additional night slots in London for the first time, or what's looking like to become a more regular thing. So more airports losing night slots. Airports losing customs hours as far as standard customs overtime in the U.S., relying on things like RSP to fill the gap. The stuff they talked about in France about GA flights being banned of a certain length. There's a lot of pressure on us right now, and they come around. It's being expressed through sustainability regulations, tax regulations, and tracking of persons and flights. That's really kind of expressing itself in those 3 ways.
No, that's awesome. That's a lot of stuff you've got to be on top of if you want to. Does this play? Do you guys work with aircraft with like directors of aviation and aircraft managers to kind of help them set these up. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and what I spent a lot of my time with at NBAA base here a few weeks ago in Vegas was just talking to directors of aviation and ops managers and directors of dispatch and chief pilots about where do you get your information? Where do you then what do you do with that, right? What's your regulatory process? Because I think everybody is still everybody's collecting these capabilities as they travel the globe, right? Like, you go around the globe and you visit these 6 countries, and now you do all the necessary things to go to those 6 countries. And so you could go to those 6 again, right? But what if the next trip has 5, 3 of those same countries, but 3 new ones? Now you got to scramble and make sure you got everything for those 3. So it's they're telling us this old way of how we've gone about these things is leaving us in a gap. And they're also saying that we, the business aviation industry, is trying really hard to communicate. We are podcasting our butts off. We are newslettering. We are weekly emailing. We are daily webinaring. We are just throwing it all out there all the time, and then leaving the operators in this kind of weird position with a kind of a net and a glove, and like trying to grab it as it all goes by. And we're constantly talking about what the latest thing in the news is. And you think about how a news cycle works, and that's where so many people are getting their operational information is from the news cycle. And so, like, when do we report on things in the news cycle? When they're first new, right? So they get you that pop. So I can tell you, hey, Hong Kong APIS is going to be a thing in next April 2025, and you'll be like, wow, Adam's on top of his stuff. He knows what's going to happen 6 months from now. And then I'm going to tell you again about a month out, and I'm going to say, hey, remember, Hong Kong APIS is a thing here in 2 weeks, starting in 2 weeks. And if you haven't taken advantage of that 5 months between there to do something about it, and now you've got a trip coming up to the region. Maybe you're not even going to Hong Kong first, but you're going to the region. Maybe you're going to China. You got to think about, what if you had to divert? What if you had to move the airplane? What if you had, what if? So if you're reading it in the newspaper, you're going to read about it when it's first announced, and you're going to read about it when it's about to go live. And all the action needs to happen between those things. And there's usually a lack of impetus to push people to action between those two things. And very few people have a process to take the things that sound like them, look like them, interest them, and put them into some sort of workflow. Like I read about this thing in October. How do I make what happens next? Right? Like that's what I just kept asked. What happens next? And it's a lot of stuff like, well, so and so is our pilot who deals with choose your thing: safety, security, sustainability, whatever. So I forward it to Bill. Bill is our pilot who does with sustainability. Okay, great. What does Bill do? Well, I don't know, right? These conversations run out pretty quick, right? They run out pretty quick, and it's because we've spent our whole lives and our whole careers sprinting to these trips to make sure everything's taken care of, in that limited setting for these limited locations for this limited period of time. Versus and the things that we needed that we approached more broadly were things like LOAs, like the fundamental. Can we legally fly this airplane to that other landmass? And then forgetting all the patchwork regulations for the countries and airspace and cities and airports and whatever that fall under that, or I guess you build on top of that foundation of LOAs, right? You have to continue to build that access, build that flexibility, build those capabilities. And often, to be at your best, you're going to have to do it before you know you need it.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. What you're speaking about really reminds me of the entrepreneur side of things with some of my coaches and some of my mentors. And they talk about, you're always sitting around kind of waiting for an opportunity to come your way. And you think, man, when that opportunity arises, I'm going to take that opportunity to its fullest. But if you're starting to get ready when the opportunity arises, you're too late. It's not the time to stand up. You should have been standing up and preparing and getting ready for that opportunity so that when it did rise, you stepped out in full stride and were able to run, And so like, it makes complete sense in what you're talking about. It's like, you have to plan for contingencies in those countries. If you're flying over these other, like if you're flying over Europe and you're going through Germany and, a couple of other countries along the way. You might want to have some contingencies just in case you have an emergency, you need to land, or something like that. But not having those in place already, when you have an emergency and you don't have that stuff set up, now you've got your entire team on the back end jumping through hoops trying to figure out how to make this happen.
Well, I think in some ways, Joe, I think the technology think what an airplane can do today, what the flagship airplanes for the main manufacturers are doing today versus what the flagships were doing 20 years ago. Now, when I started in the early 2000s, if you were, G4s, most G4s were your big international carrier, as far as, what was pushing most heavy stuff across the pond. So you're planning for multiple stops just to get there, right? And it was going to take you several days to get there, and there was a different buffer, right, of when this trip may start and when it's going to, and when we need to have things arranged to be there in Germany, because Germany is going to take you 2 stops, right? Or Germany is going to take you, depending on where you're leaving the U.S., it may take you 2 stops. Versus today being able to go direct from damn near anywhere in the U.S. to somewhere like Germany. And so I think it has changed our planning cycles without us really even knowing it, because we've got these aircraft that are now, capable of going, 50% or 100% farther in some cases. Aircraft that were doing 4,000 nautical miles or 4,200 nautical miles at max, now they're doing 7,500 nautical miles.
Amazing.
And what I'm saying is, if you're going to have a $70 million airplane that can do 7,500 nautical miles in any direction tomorrow, you should start planning like that. You should start planning that to make it as capable as possible in any direction, right? Within reason, right? Don't go start doing your Antarctica permits just yet if that's not on your if that's not on the horizon. But so I think it's. That's the approach for us now on the professional side, or for me personally, that's my approach, is spending much more time with aircraft operators and getting way down into what their problems are and how we can get ahead of those problems outside of it. Which of those problems can we get ahead of outside of the trip environment, and how far ahead of them can we get, and how can we build a system and build a process that as the new stuff comes in, it's we bolt on instead of starting again at the beginning, right? Like these are different flavors of the same requirement, not a completely new product and service, and in so many different ways.
Well, and that's why you are that guy. You know what I'm saying? Because you analyze all this stuff, and this is why you're an expert in this space, is because you reverse engineer the process and make sure that it's going to work for the customer.
That's the thing about working at, Joe, that Universal has given me more of an opportunity to end up at where I've ended up than anywhere. Because when you're planning something for Universal, or you're trying, my job is creating products and services to service international aircraft operators, focused on regulatory. But when you're doing that for Universal, you have to do it for every size aircraft that could be operating from anywhere in the world to anywhere in the world in any time frame, commercial or private, in any customized setup. And they're all snowflakes, right? So as much process and best practice and all of those things that we build around all of these trips, they are still individually customized missions. And so you've got to build the procedures and best practices, but you're still executing a customized mission, which is a huge challenge in our business for everybody who's out there trying to support any number of aircraft operators. You know it. You interact with aircraft operators and know everybody's got their way of doing things and what they expect from you, and they have different levels of experience, different levels of knowledge, and I don't think that we should hopefully be in this day and age. We shouldn't be successful based on that type of stuff. We need to make these kind of systems and best practices and stuff more available to people.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So reflecting on your career, Adam, so far, what are you most proud of, and what drives you to keep innovating and contributing to our industry?
It's funny. I was writing some stuff down for this with you, and then, like I said, I was going to visit a couple of classes. So I went and visited the new hires class, and then I went and visited the scheduler and dispatcher. So Gary Martin has a FAA dispatcher license course. Universal also does that going on. So I always go in there and visit with them on the third day, which is of that first week. Wednesday or Thursday that first week is when anybody who's been through that class, that's when you just want to pull your hair out and you want to give up and you think this was a terrible idea and you shouldn't be here and it's all bad. So I always bring kolaches and donuts in on the morning of that either third or fourth day and say, if you're still here, you're going to make it, right? If you haven't given up at this point, and I promise you, Gary will get you through this, and then to share some different things to help me through it. But it makes me think back to the stuff that when you say, what are you most proud of, right? Like it's all in eras for me. It's, me and Taylor Swift, right? It's all in eras and those different, and then it continues to stack on itself, right? So the things that the first time I got my first supervisor job on that global regulatory services team working under Laura. And that's when you first start to realize that there are other, it's not just a job. And now you're not just considering yourself, but now you're privy to more company information. You're privy to more financials. You've got a team that's reporting to you and you've got to care about them and think about other things. So, getting that first supervisor job was a huge thing for me into figuring out, do I like this, right? Do I want to, do I like managing people? Do I like working with people? And it pushed me to get into to go do some things in school and go learn some things that I didn't know and some things that I didn't have experience in, right? And the next thing was EU ETS project lead. When Laura Everington, my mentor, handed me a 200 and something page annex and said, we've got to have a solution to this thing in the next 6 or 7 months. She was working on another major, huge, giant project, private APIS at the time. She's like, I don't have time for this. I need somebody to take the lead. You're my guy. You got this. And as we worked through that, she showed up to the first several meetings and then less meetings and less meetings. And then it was just my thing. Right.
Yeah. Well, that had to feel good though, that she came to you and she's like, listen, I'm swamped. I know you can handle this,
Yeah, well, she didn't. She didn't have a whole lot of choices, but she was willing to roll the dice, and then luckily I was able to grab it and go. And then I started bumping into a ceiling there in regulatory, Joe. She was the industry's best and the originator. So I couldn't think of unseating her, but I'm a young ambitious guy, and so I went to go when a job came up as the manager of our charter operations teams. I went for it, even though and that was managing a whole bunch of mission advisors, a lot of mission advisors in some huge accounts. And I had nothing but my regulatory experience and my confidence walking through the door. Right. And I had to get real humble. And it was about what because I had these team of some of these people had been doing this already for 20 years. These and were like the industry stalwarts, and now they're reporting to me in name only, right? I was just there to learn in so many ways, and that charter team working with dispatchers and really having to go and spend time in operations pushed me to apply for the schedulers and dispatchers committee. And when I applied for that, I remember thinking I was going to go in there as this expert, and just like I did when I went to the charter job, that I was going to be this expert, and people were going to get all of this from me, right? Certainly like I was thinking about myself, right? And then you get there, and you're like, oh shit, it was the same experience when I got to charter. I realized how much I had to learn. When I got to the schedulers and dispatchers committee, I realized how much I had to learn, and that pushed me to go and pursue a license. Because when I sat in that committee that first year, I said, I think I want to lead this thing. That's kind of how I go into this stuff, right? Like, what do I really want to do here? And what is that going to take? What's the commitment? And in this job and with the committee the way it was at that time, it was going to be like 6 years. But even more than the time frame, I thought if I'm going to stand up in front of these people as a peer, and then certainly as their leader, I got some work to do. There's some things I need to learn to up my game, right? And so going and getting that license and learning that stuff, learning what it takes to volunteer. You and I were talking about it, before on it takes some time to get into your first professional volunteer job to understand what's really going to be required to pull your weight. Right, because you got on that committee, I got 30 other volunteers in there, and it was incredibly important to me that they saw me as a contributor. I wasn't there for for the experience, or I wasn't there
Yeah.
for the name to be on the committee. I wanted to be there and learn and contribute. And I think we ended up doing some very cool things on that committee over time that I would have never guessed walking into it.
Yeah.
But it's that putting yourself into the uncomfortable situation, right?
Your life story and your story and journey throughout the industry reminds me of a quote in Arnold Schwarzenegger's book, and he said one of the most important things his dad ever told him was be useful, find a way to be useful. And it seems like no matter what you've done in your career, moving from concrete to aviation and then moving into the regulatory space and then helping out with leading that initiative and then hopping on to SDC or becoming a manager of 135 charters and figuring out like, I don't know what I'm doing here, or I have a lot to learn, and being humble and understanding I want to contribute. I want to be useful here. I want to be a part of this, not just be here. Not wanting a participation award, basically.
Everywhere I step into, I try to give value, right? Whether it's posting something on my social, like I may want something back from you in the future. I may want something out of that transaction, out of this relationship or something, but I'm not going to ask for it without giving you something, right? I'm not going to ask for it without trying to provide that value back. And that's what's made it so what's allowed me to be more well-rounded, right? And get into those spaces and win, get acknowledged and get different stuff, awards and things like that, that makes you feel good. It makes you feel like you're on the right path, and that other people are benefiting from what you're doing. That's all the goal ever is, right? Maybe when you're younger it's more competitive, it's more me. I realize as I get older and maybe my goals get bigger or whatever, but the stuff that's worth doing is all us. Very few things worth doing are me. The things that you find are worth doing and worth reflecting on, worth thinking about, are all the things that you find, where you find community, and where you find connections. And so everything I kind of throw out into the universe and the places I've gone is to try to provide value in, so then I could taking everything I was going to take back, right? I'm going to come in there, and if I'm going to participate and I'm going to get in this room, start getting onto Security Council now at MBAA. It's another one that I'm not the leading expert in security in the world, in business aviation security. I know some good programs to be a part of. I have a good methodology, but I have a lot to learn. And the Security Council will put me in a room with the people who are the best in the business, and I can learn from them. And I'll share my regulatory and trade, right? I'll share my knowledge that I have in trade until we find our common footing of how we make those things kind of sing together, right? And I think that was what was attractive about Security Council, was just another really cool room of very smart people, where I could maybe trade a few things that I know to pick up a few things they know.
Yeah, you just answered my next question, was like, what's next? So you're like right in there. You're always putting yourself in a room where you're not the smartest person, and that's really good if you're trying to grow as a person or an individual, whether in industry or in personal growth. Putting yourself in a room where, because there's a point where you are in a room and you have outgrown everybody in that room. And I'm not saying this to be like, oh, I'm better than everybody, but there's some rooms in your life where your friends or your colleagues are kind of on a level where you're at the top of that level, and you have to put yourself in rooms. If you want to grow, you have to put yourself into another room where you're the low guy on the totem pole, so that you can continue to grow and get better.
The encouraging people to sign up for stuff like scholarships, even if you've been on a committee before, or you've had other opportunities that you've taken advantage of, does not disqualify you from having future opportunities. And I think the getting people to apply for things like scholarships, getting people to look for that next thing, especially in business aviation, where people will be so welcoming to you, but encouraging everybody to continue that level up and that learning mindset, and that figuring out ways to change things for the better. Because we had that we were in the Building Better Networks meeting the other day, the other networking meeting, and Colin from MBAA was talking about how do you share about business aviation to high school kids, and I referred him back to his own graphic, right? That business aviation is every job. That job, any job, name it and put your finger on it, and is available in one form or another in business aviation. We just have to our map on how to find it and orient yourself is a little bit different than some other industries because we are independent aircraft operators are like independent contractors in so many ways.
Actually,
like they have
I agree. It's like you're an entrepreneur.
They have shared goals and shared environment and shared rules and shared like all this stuff, but they're all trying to do it just their own specific way through all of those shared things, right? And that's really what's interesting about this business is and makes it where it never gets old is the continued customization and which means the continued need for, and all of those environments changing all the time, which means you have to innovate, we have to keep building, and we have to keep building together because there's so many different pieces, there's so many different roles, there's so many different types of operators that we've got to be we do have to have some place where we're a shared voice kind of speaking out for this industry, because if you leave people to be an individual operator or independent contractor, they'll do that. They'll disengage if you don't keep them engaged.
Yeah. Well, Adam, man, we're coming up on time. I wish we could talk for a lot longer, but man, I super appreciate you coming out. Guys, if you don't know who Adam is on LinkedIn or on any of the social platforms, we'll have his links in the show notes so that you can see them. Is there anything that you'd like to maybe leave or close out, last words before we hop off?
No, just what I told you when I first got on here, right before we started, Joe. Do the uncomfortable thing, and for today, that was this. This was the uncomfortable thing for me, which I know is means it's the right thing. Anyway, do the uncomfortable thing. Try to find that connection, find the community in business aviation, because it's definitely out there in all sorts of forms and flavors with some great people looking to help you get a leg up in this business. So that's all I would say is put yourself out there, and if there's anybody that has questions for me or thinks I can help connect them to something, reach out. Glad to chat anytime.
Fantastic. And he is. So, dude, it's fantastic to talk to you. We got to talk more. And I would love to have you back on the show. We can talk about networking and what you're doing over at STXBAA and all that stuff. Would love to have you back on for a second episode here soon, just to give some more information. But guys, that's Adam Hartley, good friend of mine. Super happy to have you here, man. And thank you. I think our audience will really benefit from this conversation. So this is Flight Level Zero. I'm Joe Peebles, your host, and we're out.